بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا، وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم.
آمين.
أسأل الله تبارك وتعالى أن يجعل نياتنا خالصة لوجهه الكريم.
آمين.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام.
Inshallah ta'ala, we welcome you to another gathering of our scattered thoughts. And today, inshallah, we have with us our beloved Imam, Dr. Al-Hajj Talib Abdur Rashid from MIB in Harlem. Jazahullahu khaira. May Allah raise his rank and reward him immensely.
Ameen.
So he's going to, inshallah, have his version of scattered thoughts today and talk about issues that pertain to us from his experience and his viewpoint, and talk about his involvement and what he is going to discuss during the summit, inshallah, so that you can have some, insight to what we need to be doing, and a word from our senior imams and our elders who've been in the struggle. And I say from my side, even in my long years, one of the things that I miss and I think is necessary and an integral part of our community that we have neglected is the advice and leadership and direction of our elders. And I mention to this y'all all the time that when I'm overseas and even when we're dealing with our shuyukh in other cultures, there's always, even if the person don't know much, you don't have to have a lot of shar'i knowledge, but there's a level of respect that just is maintained, whether that person's a scholar or a layman who has reached the age of maturity and above, especially the age of being a sheikh. And I mean by age, by experience, and that don't have to necessarily be an old person. By experience, people who've been through, they become the sheikh in that affair, right? And my personal opinion from my many conversations with Imam Talib, not only just in Islam, but he's a sheikh in our experience as Black people here in America, right? For sure. A historian in that. And I think we need that. I know we need that experience. And while we have them alive, while they're in our midst, we better take advantage, we better show reverence, and we better learn some lessons. So I'm going to turn it over to my beloved Imam, and I'm going to join in with you, but I'm here to gather some Jews for us as well. تفضل إمام.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على النبي الكريم صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وأصحابه وأنصاره أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وبعد, for dear Azizi Habib Imam Amin, Imam Amin, and dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Do you hear some choppiness? Your voice is very choppy.
No, I don't hear any at all.
Does anyone hear choppy, or is it just my side? Or is it clear for everyone? Let's make sure, because your voice sounds extremely choppy. Yeah, it's static. Do you have anything open besides your phone or computer?
Uh, no. Can someone answer your question that way?
Yeah, they all hear static. It's choppy.
Boy, let me see. I don't hear anything. Let me just.
Yeah, everyone hears it choppy. That sounds better. Go ahead.
Okay, what I did was I just tapped my mic just to make sure that it's.
It's still choppy.
Okay, hold on 1 minute. Um, I hope that's not the steam coming out my radiator. Uh, um, okay, so let's do a mic check. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah,
One,
it's still.
two, three,
Why
5.
don't you log out and log back in real quick?
All right, we'll do.
Maybe see if that's what's happening. Just log out and then come right back in. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So someone asked me about the schedule. Uh, oh, it's probably the radiator. Okay. About for the summit. So we do have a schedule, right? However, because of the many speakers and negotiating their schedules, we couldn't nail down. We have to be a little flexible because everybody has not submitted when they're going to arrive. And so that's still an issue. But I can give you the general format. As for the speakers, who's going to speak where, uh, we'll talk about that. But the schedule is from 10 in the morning to 9 at night. Oh, yeah, that might be better. 10 in the morning to 9 at night. Saturday and Sunday. And Friday is from 4 to 9 at night. So Friday from 4 to 9 at Masjid Muhammad. Saturday and Sundays from 10 in the morning to 9 at night, every day. So I'll give you that. But the speakers, how they're going to speak, we have to rearrange some stuff because we had it set up. And then speakers said, I can't make it at that time. It's too early for me. so I need you to be flexible. And anyone who knows me, I work best in the midst of confusion. So, so, so don't worry. We're going to make it happen. Ready, man?
So how is this, Imam? Is this any better?
It's perfect.
Okay, great. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على النبي الكريم صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وأصحابه وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وبعد. So, Azizi Imam Habib Amin and brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. I want to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for several things. One, I want to thank him for this upcoming summit, African American Summit, and for Imam Amin's uh, outreach to me. And I want to thank Allah who sustains us from day to day, moment to moment. And I want to offer dua to Allah, asking Him to guide us and to protect us, protect our children and our elders during this time of fitna. You know, when you look in the Sahih collection of ahadith, uh, the different ahadith are classified. Imam Amin knows it very well. And even when we look at the English translation, They appear to be classified in chapters, but they're really collections. And each one is called Kitab of so and so, Kitab of Iman, Kitab of Tahara. Well, there's also a Kitab of Fitna, in which the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, speaking in his capacity as uh, Nabiyun wa Rasulun, where he's speaking prophetically about the fitna and the age of fitna. And we're in the right smack dab in the middle of an age of fitna. And so this is one of the reasons why I openly express my gratitude to Allah for the African American Summit and for Imam Amin's invitation. So I'm going to warn you all right up front. This is a warning, or rather, it's an advisory. Don't listen to Imam Talib Abdur Rashid, expecting for him to talk and sound like a lot of other imams that you listen to. Okay, because if you do, you're going to be disappointed. I am, in the words of the younger generation, unapologetically Muslim and unapologetically black. And so, you need to strap in because I'm going to try to speak to the gravity of the moment. Let me first again thank Allah and make sure that I want to say something that's very obvious. It's very obvious, and we know it, but I want to state it anyway. And that is that the entire country and our area where we are here, that we are in a state of recovery from trauma. The pandemic that gripped the world from here to Mecca and back, and that gripped um, the country was traumatic. Here I'm Imam of the Mosque of Islamic Brotherhood, Masjid al Akawiyat al Islamiyah, uh, and we're in Harlem in New York City. And although people are walking around like stuff never happened, some folk, pandemic had a great traumatic effect on people here in the New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania area. Uh, the effect knew no boundaries as far as, race, ethnicity, religion, no boundaries. Everyone was impacted. The brothers and sisters in the congregation, Muslim, Christian, Jew, and otherwise, were traumatized, and their leaders were traumatized. And we're still recovering, and we pray and asking Allah for continued mercy. I remember 20 years ago, um, around 2003, I think it was, um, 2 years after 9/11. One day here in New York City, some planes flew low over the city, jets. They flew over Manhattan, and it was because they were filming a movie. But the people in the street in Lower Manhattan went into a panic. It was all on the news the next day. People started running, screaming, ducking for cover and what have you, until they got an all clear because they didn't realize that they had been traumatized by 9/11. So even though this was just a couple of years later, the sight of low flying planes triggered their fear and their a sense of panic. And so I often think of this as I move around New York City. Um, you walk into some spaces, people are masked. They're not masked. They're crowded up. Still on COVID protocol. Some of them no protocol. Everybody skipping and dancing. Broadway, which was shut down during the pandemic. As I sat in my apartment, what the most startling sight that I saw during the pandemic was Times Square shut down, dark, empty, etc. And as I talked to religious leaders, some of them were imams, some of them were Christians, some of them were Jews, and people are telling me they lost 40 people in their congregation, 50 people in their congregation, uh, etc. And some of them were telling me that themselves have been sick. I hope that no one thinks that now, because we're just a year or two out, that we were not traumatized, that the imams who were burying people have not been traumatized. That when I stand now, I was out on sick leave during that period of time. And once I came back to the minbar, I uh, would stand at the minbar, and when I would look out at the Jamaat that had gathered for worship, I could literally remember and almost see people who had died because I remember, oh yeah, brother so and so, he used to sit over there. So this one here, he used to be in that chair or that spot on the rug or in the chair. He's no longer there. So one might ask, well, how is this relevant to the African American uh, summit? Well, beyond the pandemic, Americans of African descent were still suffering from over 4 centuries of trauma. And because we have BET and, you know, 50 years of hip hop, and because we had a African American president who came and gone, that don't mean that we're not still suffering from trauma as a people. And Americans of African descent are still suffering from trauma, and that includes those of us who are Muslims. The Black American community, and I'm going to borrow now a phrase from Imam Amin, the Black American community is being engulfed, as is America itself, by a culture of dysfunction. The uh, Muslim Americans of African descent, in spite of our access to the Quran, in spite of our access to beneficial knowledge, in spite of uh, the fact that we can openly worship, and we have now, generations of our people, generations of Muslim Americans of African descent. Uh, we find that even though we've been given the salvation or access to the salvation that our ancestors prayed for, we find ourselves engulfed in a culture of dysfunction that's undermining the progress that one might think we would have made by now. So this is why the African American Summit, Muslim Summit, Islamic Summit is so important. And I felt this way going back a few years from when I first heard about it, I felt and I spoke to Imam Amin and I expressed to him how important this summit is and other summits and other gatherings like it because it helps to focus us in on our problems, the problems of Muslim Americans of African descent. By the time you get um, to be an elder like me, and you get to the point where you've got, you know, grown sons and daughters and grandchildren, and some of us might even have great grandchildren. And you look at your family and you look around, you realize that the clock is ticking. I want to emphasize something Imam Amin said just now because I'm feeling it in my heart. I'm witnessing it with my eyes. You know, there once was a time when I would read the hadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, wherein he spoke about one of the signs of the time, meaning prophetically, would be that Allah would remove the people of knowledge uh, from the midst of the Ummah. And up until just the past couple of years, I'm 72 years old. I took Shahada at 20. Up until the past couple of years, when I used to think about that hadith, I used to think just about people dying. You know, that when Allah say He will remove that, I always thought that that meant that Allah would send the angel of death for people, and you would look at a generation and you would see, you know, elders, I am much, you're passing away. And it does mean that. I mean, in one dimension of meaning. And I realize that now that I'm over 70 and having had a very serious bout personally with illness, going on medical leave for the first time in my 33 years as the Imam of MIB. And I'm looking around now at other leaders, some of them my age, some of them a bit younger than me. And I'm watching, I'm witnessing people dying. Those who are not dying are becoming ill. They're becoming incapacitated. And so the same leaders who had the strength and the energy, like Imam Amin's energy, they'll be lecturing and traveling all over the place and, you know, walking on the front lines of demonstrations and raising, you know, getting in righteous good trouble in courtrooms and all this kind of stuff. Those from my generation, we are passing now, and so it is in fact critical that we not take the presence of folk for granted because you're gonna blink your eye. There's an old African proverb. It says, "The young walk faster, but it's the elders who know the way." And so I'll take a little pause here, let Imam Amin, and because I have a lot to say, y'all. So y'all better keep your eye on the clock because if he get going and I get going, I don't know how long we're going to be on here this morning.
So, Imam Barakallahu Bikum, I really, I, 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 when I have these opportunities, I like to learn from your experience. So you're talking about over 50 years of witnessing our community. And I know you've seen so many developments, changes, positive, challenge wise. I don't have to say negative, challenges, right? You've seen this community. What are lessons that you think over your 50 or more years of experience and your 33 years of experiences as a leader, as an imam, what do you think some things that we need to really, really hone in on right now from your experience?
Yes,
Because we all over the place. We in TikTok world, we in, as you talked about this culture of dysfunction, that's because we scattered all over the place. I think directing us to some pertinent things that we need to be paying attention to, your experience would tell you that, where one of us may miss it. What are some of those things, or some of the most important of them, or even one of the most important of them that you believe, yeah, pay attention?
yes. So I'd like to talk primarily about three things during this time that we have allotted. First, let me just say that last week, April 27th, marked the 56th year of the existence of our Jamaat. That the MIB became incorporated, body April 27th, 1967. So we are now 56 years old. And as I said, I have been a Muslim for 52 out of those 56 years. When Allah opened my heart to Islam, I was 20 years old, and Allah guided me directly to MIB, to the Mosque of Islamic Brotherhood. I became a member, a active, participating, soldiering, working member as a 20-year-old, and I'm still here now doing the same. So my entire youth, 2/3 of my life, I've been a Muslim, and all of my youth, and now way beyond my youth, I've been right here on post at MIB. So I'm not only a witness to what has been occurring in our ummah, I'm part of it. I'm a participant. I have a page in the living book of the ummah within the ummah, the Jamaat within the ummah. That is the unique um, exposure experience of Americans of African descent. So having said that, there are three things that I want to mention in response to Imam Amin's question. The first thing is actually it's a teaching from one of the great um, academic minds of the 20th century. One of the great minds of the 20th century was the late Sheikh Anta Diop, known popularly in the black community, black American community. They call him Anta Diop, Anta Diop, who was an African Senegalese polymath, after whom Sheikh Anta Diop University in Dakar, Senegal, uh, is his name. Sheikh Anta Diop, uh, Muslim from generations of Muslims. For those who know, his family, they're Muridiya, they're Murids from the in spiritual tradition. Uh, Sheikh Diop was a historian and anthropologist and a scientist, where he's one of the pioneers of the science of radioactive carbon dating. He's very heavy person, and many of the people in his ancestral line were religious scholars and what have you. He was a scientist, and his show you the relevance of the work that people do. His PhD thesis, which he defended 3 times, I think. He had to defend his PhD. His PhD thesis was on the fact of the original ancient Egyptians being black people. He had to defend that 3 times because he's standing before these, all white boards of academians in Sorbonne, France, and they're saying, "Oh man, you crazy! That ain't what I saw in the movies, man. That kind of thing." So Sheikh Anta Diop, in his writings, he has voluminous writings. So in his writings, one of the things that he wrote about is the difference between, and he wrote this within the context of focusing on African people globally. He talked about the difference between being a people and being a population. And he highlighted the fact that many of our people, many people of the African diaspora, are labeled population and not a people. And if you listen carefully to the daily news, news media, they all talk about the black population. All right. There's a difference between being a people, and being a population. People have, uh, Sheikh Diop said, people have cultural unity. People have a historical consciousness. People have uh, a linguistic factor. There are elements to historical, linguistic, cultural underpinning of being uh, a people. And that's all people. So one of the things that Muslim Americans of African descent have been struggling with, because we are of African descent, one of the things we've been struggling with over the centuries is, who are we as a people? And practicing the self-determination to identify ourselves as being a people, and to act, to think, and to act in our own self-interest and self-benefit as a people, and asserting ourselves in that manner so that other people will regard us in that way. When we as Muslim Americans of African descent, we're in a so-called, and I use this term in quotes because other people use it, we live in a land of immigrants. That's how they describe America, a land of immigrants. When I hear that language, I always say, no, America's a land of, predominantly a land of immigrants. But it's not a land of immigrants. The Native Americans, the original Americans, were not immigrants. Unless you looking, back millennia ago, with they came over from Asia, crossing the Bering Strait or whatever. But in terms of this land, North America, Native Americans are not immigrants. And Americans of African descent are not immigrants. We didn't pack a bag any place and voluntarily relocate ourselves from where we came from to where we are. We were, in modern political language, we were forcibly transplanted. Why do I mention that? I mention that because those of us who are Muslim from that group, that makes us unique within the American landscape. We're the people who are not immigrants. We're not the muhajirun of this land. We are the ansar of this land as Muslims. And we have a unique circumstance, uh, unique challenges, unique issues, but we are still a people, a Muslim people. Last week, well, let me, so that's my first point. We're a Muslim people, not a population. And so here's a true story. So anyone who knows me knows that I am on the board, and I'm one of the original founders of MANA, the Muslim Alliance in North America. So I was looking the other day at a flyer for our first conference that we had, a Black American Muslim Conference. Uh, and the focus and the topic of that conference were the issues that are specifically impacting so-called Muslim African Americans. And I remembered how people responded. Muslims. I'm only talking about Muslims. I remember the response of some Muslims to our announcement that we were forming uh, an organization focused on the needs and the challenges and realities of Muslim Americans of African descent. I remember the response. I remember the response from many of the immigrant organizations. I ain't got to name them. Their response was one of opposition. It was what is that phrase? Uh, Microaggression opposition, but it was opposition. Well, why y'all want to do that? Why y'all need to do that? You know, if you need to organize yourself, why can't you do it? Under the rubric of what we have set up. I mean, there. Believe me, if I started naming organizations and naming names, some of you would be shocked. Others of you would not be shocked at all. And see, they wouldn't talk to me like that. They would go to somebody who they felt would not curse them out. If they brought that to me, I might have cussed them out. So they would bring it to our diplomats, like Imam Siraj, and then he would relate to us. Listen, this is what people are saying, and people were saying that. And when I heard them saying that, I said to myself, back then, it was 20 years ago, y'all don't understand. As one of my friends, I have a friend of mine who's an Imam. He's over there in New Jersey. All right. He's an Arab immigrant, been in America 25, 30 years. So I was riding with him recently, and he said to me, he said, I wonder how many of these Muslims who are in America now, who come from Arab countries, who come from South Asian countries, who come from European countries, and who have these nice paying jobs, who work in hospitals, Dr. So and so, engineer so and so, and they go to the masjid. He said, I wonder how many of them realize that if it were not for the work and the sacrifice and the struggle of those of you who are Muslims, black people, that they wouldn't even have been able to get into this country. Now, this is the immigrant saying this to me. He said, much less practice Islam on the level that they are practicing it. When it comes time, alhamdulillah, we just had a wonderful Ramadan, Allah Akbar, and we find that the overwhelming majority of the Muslims in America started fasting on the same day. Overwhelming majority. We experienced a degree of unity, alhamdulillah, that I describe it as Allah unifying us in spite of the Muslims, you know. And I said to somebody the other day, yeah, man, you call home when you're want to see, did they start fasting yet? But I am home. Where am I going to call? Where no, man, this is my home. And I'm sure many of those listening, Imam Amin Muhammad, and many of those listening have the experience as Muslim Americans of African descent of running into other Muslims who have they voluntarily migrated to America or their parents did, and they look at you and I and ask us, what country are you from? Or look at you and I, as if our circumstance is theirs when it is not. So and the identity, we living in a time of what they call quote unquote identity politics. You hear this phrase every day in the media. People are asserting their identity. They are asserting their right to name themselves, to identify themselves. They even changing the English language. Nah, don't call me that. Call me this. Uh, 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 I'm not a. They changing their gender identification. I mean, all these. We living in a time of identity politics, but our people have been struggling for centuries to assert our identity. So there's even ethnically, we're the only people in America still trying to figure out who we are. Everybody else, they say, well, I'm an American. Yeah, but they say, well, yeah, but my parents come from so and so in Italy or from Bosnia or from, Gambia or whatever. Us, we got to take a doggone genetic test and go deep into our DNA where Allah hid our identity ethnically, our created identity in order to protect it. Uh, so that's one. We are people, not a population. We need to see ourselves, and too many Muslim Americans of African descent, we see ourselves as a congregation, or we see ourselves as, I'm from Philly, I'm from Harlem, I'm from wherever, Santa Clara. We don't have a national consciousness. We don't view ourselves as being a people. We view ourselves as being a population. So one of the challenges before us is to be able to see ourselves in a very fundamental way, according to the nations and tribes that Allah created us in. So that's one. Number two is to be able to unapologetically, unapologetically focus on the challenges and the problems that we have as a Muslim people in America. That's not to say that we're the only ones that have certain problems, but we've got certain problems that stem from the fact that we are black folk, and within the context of, American historic institutional racism and um, political, social, economic uh, oppression. We have certain issues, and our inability to overcome the obstacles that have been placed before us impede our progress as Muslim people. We see other Muslims come to America, and they come here to assimilate into America, you know, the way it is, and to become, honorary white folks and reap the benefits of being, as Dr. Sherman Jackson said, honorary white folks. Uh, they were honorary Muslim white folks until 9/11, and then, as Dr. Jackson said, the American government revoked their honorary status, and then they were shocked because they got relegated to a racialized assessment as Muslims. And many of our brothers and sisters, they were shocked because people start calling them names, you know, uh, raghead and all the type of stuff that we know we know very very well. And so other people are trying to take advantage. They're assimilating into America. One of the phenomena of the time, we witnessed it less than 2 weeks ago, is here's somebody to come here from India, come here from Bangladesh, come here from Pakistan, come here from Egypt, come here from wherever. And then you listen to them when they're on CNN or some other place, and they start spouting white supremacist narratives about us. They become critical of black people who are Muslim. As one brother said to me once many years ago, and if you Google my name, you'll see me quoting all of this. He said, "I don't understand what's wrong with you, African American Muslim. Y'all are always so angry about everything. Why don't you just, you know, uh, give dawah to these good white people who run this country, and keep making your prayers, and everything will be all right." I was sitting in a meeting in Washington D.C. of national leaders. It was called Muslims in the American Public Square. I'm sitting at a table with Imam Warfadi Muhammad and all these different leaders. And one of the brothers, the immigrant brothers, said that. And so my response to him was, "Would you go to Palestine and tell the Palestinian Muslims that in regard to the Israeli arm or government?" The room went quiet, dead quiet. I said, "Man, so don't come here telling us how to deal with our struggle." So now, why is this important? Well, believe me, there are things that I talk about publicly, some things I don't, some things I will reveal to Imam Amin because it's part of transmitted knowledge. But we need to learn, as Muslim Americans of African descent, we need to learn how to look after our own interests as a people, unapologetically so. We need to learn how to make decisions based upon the sources, you know, based upon the Quran, based upon the authentic ahadith, based upon the legal assessments of the fuqaha. We need to learn how to unapologetically make decisions that are in our best interest. Last week, I was listening to the news, and one of the news commentators said that this year, 2023, marks 200 years since the articulation and implementation of what's called the Monroe Doctrine. Now, many of you of a younger generation than me, you might not know about that. I'm going to encourage you. I'm going to encourage you to Google that. Google Monroe Doctrine. So the Monroe Doctrine is named after President James Monroe, who back in whatever 1823, I guess it was, uh, he articulated primarily to England, but to the world, but it was directed at England. He said in some public speech, he said, listen, everybody knows that we're the United States of America, he said. And everyone knows that we got our freedom from England. We are no longer going to tolerate, he said, people trying to recolonize us in America. And in fact, let me just give me a minute because I wanted there's a couple of specific phrases. As soon as I quote this, you're going to understand why I'm saying this. All right. So it says Monroe Doctrine, 1823. It's a, the Monroe Doctrine is best known U.S. policy towards the Western Hemisphere. Buried in a routine annual message delivered to Congress by President James Monroe in December 1823, the doctrine warns European nations that the United States would no longer tolerate further colonization or puppet monarchs. Okay, in other words, he's saying we closing our borders. Don't be trying to manipulate us from abroad. Don't try to make us your puppets. In America, we are a sovereign nation and we will exercise the rights of a sovereign nation to make decisions in our own best interest. Muslim Americans of African descent need to learn how to do that, man. We need to learn how to do that because so that we can. Why is it important? Because even as our dawah advances, even as our knowledge of the deen advances, even while the public presence of Muslims in America advances, in our major urban cities of America, if you go to the United States Census and look at it, and look at where the major African American populations are in America, the major cities. You will also find that that's where the major African American Muslim populations are. Okay, you know the city, you know, New York, Philly, Atlantic City. Yeah, yeah, you know what I mean? From here to the West Coast and back. And Islam is thriving. You know, there's no shortage of Muslims in those major cities, but the fact that those Muslims are there has not stopped the phenomena of Muslims gang banging, you know, drive-by shootings, Muslims in gangs, Muslims selling drugs and using drugs, uh, Muslims involved in domestic violence, Muslims going to prison. I'm not talking about going to prison, converting to Islam, and coming out Muslim. I mean, Muslims who were born and raised Muslim, and they going to prison for the same crimes that other people are going to. So now that we have greater access to the Quran, greater access to you can open your phone. You can open your phone and access all kind of stuff. But we find that our people within the Ummah within the Ummah, the Jamaat within the Ummah, are being consumed by a perfect storm of self-destruction. The self-destruction that is consuming the black community now. The black community itself is being consumed. Muallimi Sheikh Alama Tawfiq Rahmatullah Ali, my teacher, he used to say, quote, before it was being done to us. Now we're doing it to ourselves. And so the modern academians, they call this internalized racism. Our community is suffering from internalized racism. And we find that because we're Muslim, that does not make us immune to this phenomena that is destroying our people. There once was a time, and I'm not saying it's not still that way because I believe it is, but once was a time when the Islam and Muslims was the light in the black community. Any degree of Islam, the, the light of hope in the community, the leadership in the community, leadership and how to clean up the community, how to end certain illegal activity in the community, leadership by example, protection of women, leadership by example of what it meant to be, self-determined and all of that kind of thing. And we find in too many instances, alhamdulillah, not every instance, but in too many instances, we find the opposite of that occurring. So there's a perfect storm of self-destruction that is impacting the Muslim community just as it is impacting America itself. And then thirdly and lastly is the need that we have as Muslim Americans of African descent for the forging and maintaining of generational continuity of struggle. Imam Amin, Imam Amin was telling the truth when he talked about the lack of continuity between generations in our community, as in other communities. We have to change that because without that, and I believe me, I remember Sheikh Tawfiq saying this 40 years ago. He was saying, without generational continuity, Allah says in the Quran, Surah Al-An'am, last ayah of Surah 6 of the Quran, so he raises people up by generation. Every generation has a duty and a responsibility. And without generational continuity, we end up reinventing the wheel all over again every time there's a generation. And then we wonder why we not making the kind of progress we need to make. Well, we constantly, we have to start the Muslim school all over again, because the ones we have fallen into disrepair. We have to start the Muslim businesses again instead of. I live here in New York almost every week now, and this is part of being in the wake of the pandemic. Almost every week when I'm watching a New York-based stations called New York One, and they focus on what's going on in New York. Almost every week they have a story about a closing business in some part of New York. And this is a business that's been open and thriving 75 years, 100 years, 120 years, a pizza shop, a bakery, or this or that. How many businesses in the Muslim community do we have that been around that long? It's had that kind of continuity. So these are, and so this is one of the, I personally, again, my 30, this makes my 33rd year as Imam. Not 33 years sitting on the sideline, 33 years pugging, thumping, working, even to the point, and I want to caution Imam Amin of this. And as I do all of the younger generation of imams that are coming after me, I tell them, keep working, but take care of yourself, man. Self-neglect is an occupational hazard of this type of work. We become so absorbed.
Imam, I need to hear that in a sooner way. Can you give me 2 more of those? Man, that is on the money. I realize it, but don't realize it. So I need to repeat it to it sticks.
I know, because you caught up. You caught, but again, there's one that goes with that. It says self-care is a divine responsibility. Self-care is a divine responsibility, and self-neglect is an occupational hazard of this type of work. It's an occupational hazard of being the sheikh, being the imam. We get so caught up and we neglect ourselves, maybe even neglect our families. No, that's wrong. That's not the sunnah. The Prophet, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, he said that Allah has a hawk over us. Our bodies have a hawk over us. Our families have a hawk, a duty, a right over us. So give each one his rights, he said. And we find too many of those of us who are in leadership, we're focused on giving Allah his due, but then we don't give our families their due. We don't give ourselves, our bodies, its due. So we have to learn how to take care of ourselves, and our communities have to learn how to preserve us as well. I mean, Imam Amin, he's the treasure. The people value him, I hope, in his community. I believe they do. Then you should be preserving him. You should be looking out for him. You should be making sure, that he's always in a position to contribute that which Allah raised him up to contribute. The Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I need to wrap this up. The Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Everybody knows what he was like, personalities wise. The Prophet was kind, gentle, compassionate, giving, generous. He was all of those things that you all want for all of the imams to be. Okay? And we look at him, but then we forget to look at the people who are around him, who dedicated their lives to making sure that he could stay who he was. So the Prophet didn't, even if he was inclined, the Prophet didn't have to bust anybody upside their head when they got out of line, because he had, Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anh and Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anh. He had them, you get out of line with the Messenger of Allah around them, they would make sure that you never got out of line again. The Prophet, alayhi salam, he didn't have to go riding around the country fundraising and all that kind of stuff. Why? Because he had Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anh and Uthman and all those people. They gave their wealth. No, you keep doing what you do. We got this. We'll get the money. We'll defend the borders. Ya Rasulullah, we going out to fight these kuffar. You stay behind. Get back behind the guarded frontier. We're going forward. And they're going to have to go through us to get to you. That's the sunnah, clearly. And so we, as I once heard Imam Siraj say, Imam Siraj said, I've heard him say it publicly, but he said it to me privately. He said that once he was doing couples counseling with a married couple. And as he's trying to counsel this couple, the husband, the brother, kept saying to his wife in Imam Siraj's presence, he kept saying, I wish you would be more like Khadija. I wish you would be more like, see, that's what I'm talking. I wish you would be more like Khadija. And his wife would just kind of sit there quietly. So and Imam Siraj is watching the dynamic. So the brother says another time, I wish you would be more like Khadija. And then his wife quietly said, maybe if you would be more like Prophet Muhammad, then I could be more like Khadija. Okay. So I say that to say that we're always talking about our Imam. You know, we want our Imams to be this and do that, and we should. We should have expectations. But then what about you? We know what kind of leader you want, but what type of follower are you? We know what kind of teacher we want. What kind of student are you? Or do you just want, a pie in the sky Islam, as if uh, just the articulation of the Shahada alone? Yeah, that if you do it with a sincere heart, that's going to get you in the Jannah. Yeah, inshallah, Yeah, but what about your children? What about your grandchildren? What about our people? We know our history. Well, part of our history is we had Muslims who were enslaved on the plantation, and they were Muslim. They were Shahada Muslim. They were praying in secret, and so you want to be a modern day slave in America? Is that what you want, or do you want your children to be a modern day slave while everybody else is progressing and taking advantage? I don't think so. So this is the type of backdrop in my thoughts. This is who I am as an elder now. I speak as an elder. There are some elders who are elder to me, but also I'm elder to many of you. And I'm speaking as an elder, not based on what I read somewhere, you know what I mean? Not based on what I heard. This is part of my life experience as a Muslim growing up in America, from being a young person who is the age of my middle grandchildren now. I've got grandchildren, and my middle grandchildren are the same age that I was when I walked through the door of MIB to take Shahada. So I'm attempting to share from my life experience as well as from the sources. You can get the sources from Imam Amin. He's online every day, man. He got that young energy. I don't have that kind of energy anymore. But you can get the sources from him to me if you can make it over this way. But to me, I'm not talking to you so much about Islam. I'm talking to you about Muslims and the reality of the life of us as Muslims. And I pray that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala has blesses what I have had to share with some degree of benefit for you. And if you want to hear more, then you better come on out to the African American Islamic Summit so that we can kick it live, inshallah.
Imam, you got chills going through my body. SubhanAllah. You know what I say when I listen to you, and I just say we we are a people, and we have some lions among us, experienced lions, experienced soldiers, experienced warriors, and that continuity you're talking about. We need that spirit along with the knowledge and information, because a lot of us, our spirit is broken. So we have the knowledge, we even have the physical capacity and ability, but a broken spirit,
Absolutely. And
right?
let me just, Imam, so Sheikh Alama Tawfiq Rahmatullah Ali, he said that slavery, that its dynamic was based on mind bending and will breaking. Mind bending and will breaking. And that process, scientific process of mind bending and will breaking, we Muslim Americans of African descent are suffering right now from that trauma of that mind bending and will breaking process. You better believe it. You better believe it. And there are other Muslims. I don't want to, like I said, and there are specifics. You know, you don't say everything in public, but I can give specifics. You know, there are other Muslims who've been involved in what I would call a criminal conspiracy, you know, to keep Muslim Americans of African descent dependent instead of supporting us and being independent. You better believe that. If you don't believe that, then you don't know what's happening, man. You just being naive.
I'll share with you, and I think my gig is up. They notice, right? Because I was on the circuit for a long time, many years, and I was talking to one of our imams, and I'm going to be general so it don't get specific, because
yes, sir.
I realized something as I get older. I'm 43 years in this game, right? I was very young when I walked in, right? But for 30 of them, 33 of them, I've been on the battlefield, hardcore, nonstop, right? So I got a little experience. Nationally, internationally, I've been in it. And there was a time when I didn't realize this responsibility you're talking about. When I was younger, I did, but that was a phase. It dwindled out and swindled out, as you know. And then we had to have a reorganization of our focus on us as a community, as a people, individually, family, and collective as a community. But what really, I was just teaching the sciences. That's it. Learning and teaching. That was it. And to me, that was all that was important. We're going to educate ourselves out of this situation solely by gaining knowledge, connection, change, sheikhs, traveling abroad, sitting at the feet of the ulama. Yeah. And with all that, and we did it. Many of us together, as I was saying at the summit, we're going to have over 100 years of scholarship and learning among us. When we add all us up at the summit, and I was strategic in picking certain individuals for a reason, to show us what we have as resources. Because that's the part, we think we don't have anything. We got more than we need at this stage. But we was at a conference, and one of our respected shuyukh among us was disrespected in such a way I will never forget it.
Ya Allah.
And everybody got their talents. But I felt, it's just my opinion, he was more worthy of being placed than me. But I was placed and he was disrespected. And in that situation, especially that situation, there is no way that the others who were placed should have been placed above him. And it affected me. And I saw it. It blew up and I was watching. And yes, I can fulfill the role. I can do it. That ain't the point. You just undermine my people. And it changed me. From that day, I had a firm resolve to fix this situation.
I feel that.
Right? And I'm telling you, I really wanted to cry. It was so, because it wasn't about him. It was about us. And the way it was done, it was like it was about him, but it wasn't about him. Even if it was about him, you don't realize it ain't about him. And a lot of times I say something, I use myself, not because it's about me, because I can take the shot. If I use some others, you might not can't take the shot. So I'll take it. But it's really about us, right? It ain't about the end. Even if I'm the direct or you the direct target, like he was, it really wasn't a hit at him. It was a hit at all of us.
Yeah, you know what it's like, Imam? Somebody disrespect your mother or father in your presence. Man.
Right.
So who are our mothers and fathers of this experience in America, man?
So when I say that, I said to myself, from now on until I die, inshallah, my work is going to be empowering, uplifting my people, with my people, through my people, by my people, to
Yes,
my people are free.
yes,
It's sad with Islam, 2023, we're still talking about being free. And we have the deen with all this, we have knowledge that we have never seen the likes of. And despite all that, we still got this mass amount of cultural dysfunction. That
yes,
ain't nobody's responsibility but ours.
yes. That,
We have, because ain't no one else gonna do it. They don't care.
that's right.
And whether they care, they don't care consciously or unconsciously, consciously, the result is the same. You don't care. Whether you consciously do it and it's intentional and it's a conspiracy, or you just in a state of ghafla. And many people are in a state of ghafla, heedlessness. They don't even
Yeah,
realize. And I told this story yesterday, I think it was, and I don't want to go long, Imam, but
yes.
it's significant. I used to do construction, and I was leading, forming big buildings, right? So we on a $1.5 billion job, something like that. And so I sent my crew out to do their work. And it was, we all got different crews. So this white guy is on another crew, young white kid. So as I'm walking the floors of the hotel, just making sure, seeing what's going on, seeing the scope of the work, I see this white guy, this young white boy on a dumpster reading a paper. And I'm like, yo, man, you better get to work. And he looked at me. He's not on my crew. Luckily, he wasn't. He might have got beat up and fired, right? But look what he said to me. And to me, it was profound. And it was a message. He said, I'm white. I don't have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
This is a young, bottom feeder laborer, white guy. That's what he said. He said, I'm white. And he meant it. And when he said that, the fact that he was conscious that, you know what? I'm not these black dudes. I'm white. I have a certain privilege, and I don't know what you're looking at, but I know that exists. Some of people, they have a subconscious realization of that. And they act in that manner without even thinking about it.
Absolutely.
To one of my friends, one of my colleagues in the knowledge, he said to me one day, he's very, very close. He's white. He said to me, Imam, use me, I'm white. I said, what? He said, use me, I'm white. So he's conscious. He said, use me, I'm white. They're not gonna help you. I know that, you know that. And whatever help they give you is to soothe their conscience. It's not to empower you. Islamically, I know I'm guilty, but I gotta look like I'm not really guilty, so I'm gonna do something. But in no way am I going to empower you. He said, so use me, I'm white. They'll empower me, they won't empower you.
See, but here's the key, Imam. The key is you and the people with you, us and the people with us, we got to make up our mind we're going to empower ourselves with or without anybody else's help.
Exactly. But here's the catch with that, which you indicated.
But everybody gets some help. Don't get it.
No, hey, listen, no nation of people, we're not on this planet by ourselves.
Right.
And I don't even say help. I say that we need a cooperation between nations and people for the survival of the human race.
Everybody else is doing it. What's wrong with us?
Right? So I see that. But we have to come to the table as a people. So your point, we don't see us as a people, so we just get on the table. We're not at the table.
Right. And you know what, Imam? And other people, it's going to be shocking for you when I say this for some. See, other people are looking at us. When we come to the table, grand titles, impeccably articulated, every, but no substance, no backup, no unity. Other people sit at the table, they looking at us like this. They too polite. They ain't gonna call us out. They
Right.
not, but they know well. Okay, so what? And this is happening. If you talk to the elders,
Mhm.
they'll tell you about being in parts of the Muslim world where you know they're shuyuk with grand titles and all of that kind of stuff, and the government that sponsors them, have a big table and bring us in, and then try to convince us that we should accept, for political expediency, leadership of someone whose teaching is in opposition to Islam.
Oh, they
That's
always happen.
that's kind of stuff.
But wait a minute. As what's her name? Uh, what's that? The writer. Uh, back in Giovanni. What's her name?
Nikki Giovanni.
Nikki Giovanni.
Yeah.
Did you saw that interview with her and James Baldwin? That famous
I
interview
think
between
I,
her
I
and
think I
London.
saw it a long
She had a line in there when they were talking. She said the game is still running.
time.
The game is still running.
Yeah.
And I say that, repeating that echo, the game is still running.
Yeah.
That same discussion is now. I saw something, and I go kind of hard with the Sunni stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I see the game still running. Some of us, and I won't mention names, they answer the call of others. Let us call them they too busy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But the other young influentials from others, let them call them, I'm front and center. Come work with us, black people. Nah, 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 nah. We'll gently say no. I'm just too busy. You always, how come every year you so busy? But I know that, they got you so tied up. Right? Is that it? So the game is still running. But despite that, and this is with the summit, I believe. I don't think the summit is something where we need to be talking at our people. We need to be talking with our people.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because we don't, and that's some of the problems we had previous. Somebody want to come talk at us. Nah, I need you to get down here with us.
Right. And that's why I began my presentation today telling you what happened when we started Manna. It's the same thing. And this is, again, people want to know, well, why haven't you all made more progress? I'm going back to that MAPS meeting I was in.
Mm.
Somebody said, well, why haven't y'all had Islam all this time? And why haven't African American Muslims made more progress in America than this here? And I told them, you don't go to Palestine and ask them that, man. How much progress have the Palestinian Muslim people made since 1948, man? And 75 years ago when the state of Israel was founded, man. Yeah. How much progress have they made?
I got a deep question. If you got a couple minutes, I know I'm dragging the time, but I've been wanting to ask this because it's a gap for me, and it maybe occurred and I just didn't realize. Did anyone pick up the baton to put our plight between the United Nations as a people after Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz?
Yes and no.
Yeah, could you give me a little? This I know it might be off, but it's something just like I've been thinking about it because I've been we've been talking. I've been doing this big
Yeah,
history thing, and that for me is like because this with the summit, I want to see us come emerge from the summit as a people,
yes,
and that's our work from this summit to the next summit to function and to cooperate and to build as a people. I know everyone not joining that, but I just want to get some soldiers who are ready. And I believe we've gathered grassroots people, whether leaders or people, we've established the relationship. We got hundreds of people right now watching us, hundreds. And they do it every day. That's hard. That means they have it in the heart. The spirit is there, but we need to galvanize that energy to actual a productive work.
right,
Because we like to sing, but when it comes to swing, that's a whole other story,
right.
right? So we need to get that other part. But give me that
Yeah,
summarized version, however, but I want to try to understand what happened.
right. So let me say something. When you no honest, intelligent person can look at Muslim Americans of African descent as a whole, as a people, and say that we and our community are not greatly impacted by the culture of dysfunction.
Mm.
If you don't admit that, either you are oblivious to reality or you just lying, man. I mean, really. That's like somebody look at America and say, ain't nothing wrong with America, man. Everything's all right here. Ain't no problem. No, we have issues, as the younger generation says. Why do I say that? When you go to the doctor, because we're not trying to stew in our dysfunction. We're trying to liberate ourselves or put ourselves in a position where Allah can inspire us to rescue us from our, what David Walker, 19th century abolitionist black leader David Walker called our wretched condition. Okay? When you go to the doctor, the first thing they do after they take your medical card, your credit card,
Get
when they
that
take,
bread. Wait. I got to add to that. You notice the doctor don't forget that money, right?
no, as soon as you come in the door, first thing they did, ask you, but love, can I see? But then when you sit down, first thing they do is they tell you, fill this out with your medical history. Before you see a doctor, you have to document your medical history, the good and the bad of it, so that by the time you go before people who are qualified to treat you, they've looked at what your issues are coming in the door. They looked at your history. They don't ask you for somebody else's history unless it's a relative of yours. They might say, "Well, does this run in your family?" Oh yeah. Does diabetes run in? Oh yeah. Okay. So why do I mention that? Because I've noticed, and this is me talking, there's too much about our history that we don't know. And again, this comes from viewing ourselves as being a population and not as a people. Because people have history, people have legacy, people take people take their history seriously. So let's go straight to your question about the initiative and the trajectory of Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz rahmatullah alayhi to bring our plight as a people, not as a population, but as a people before the United Nations. First thing you have to know is that didn't start with Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz. Okay? that there was a group of African American activists and notables, Paul Robeson, William Patterson. They're the ones that started that. We charge genocide.
Mm.
Okay, so from in our struggle for uh, human rights, see, genocide as a legal definition, genocide. Genocide was not defined until after World War II.
Mm.
Look back at the history. There was no internationally accepted definition of genocide until in the aftermath of World War II, because of what happened with the Jews in Europe under the Nazis. In that aftermath, and there's a book I highly recommend to all of your listeners. There's a book called Eyes Off the Prize.
Mm.
Eyes Off the Prize by a very profound writer and teacher, Carol Anderson is her name. Eyes Off the Prize. And what she does is she meticulously documents the struggle for Black freedom in America and how after World War II, as the Black American soldiers are coming back from fighting Hitler, all of that kind of stuff. They're running right back into American apartheid. She writes it how once genocide was defined and the Jews, the European Jews, start making their move to get some reparations and all of that other kind of stuff, right? The Black leaders of that time, they looking at that. They say, "Oh man, this is the move here." So they start following that same trajectory. And then the United States, Germany, France, Italy, all these countries who were the founders of the United Nations. United Nations was founded in the aftermath of World War II. That's when they got together as they're making that transition from the League of Nations to the United Nations. They got together and said, "Okay, well, we got to have some rules here. We got to have some laws." So one of the rules, one of the laws that they agreed upon at that time was, nations cannot interfere in the domestic relations of other nations. You got to stay on the outside. You can't be coming in, regardless of what's going on. You can't be coming in, interfering with what's going on inside of a nation. That was really a chess move against the Black freedom struggle.
Mm.
That was designed to keep other people, from intervening on our behalf. And so the civil rights leaders, A. Philip Randolph, Walter White, all of them that started NAACP and all of them, they went to civil rights as a fallback position because the human rights move that they were getting ready to make got checkmated by the founding nations, Euro nations of the UN.
Mm.
However, a group of the African American freedom fighters, they said, "Well, no, man, we're not going for that. We're going to keep pushing this envelope." So that during that period of time, from the 40s to the 60s, is where you get these two forks: civil rights, human rights. Paul Robeson and them, they were human rights advocates, not civil rights. All right. So now, as Malcolm Little is in prison, listening to the radio, he used to listen to Paul Robeson. He was a great admirer of Paul Robeson. In fact, if you listen to what we consider, Minister Malcolm X, listen to his speaking style. He has a style like Paul Robeson. So these human rights in the minority, black freedom fighters. They presented the United Nations with a document in the 50s. I forget the exact date now. Um, we charge genocide, where they were trying to get the United Nations back then to look at the plight of black people in America, right, and to um, intervene on our behalf. Okay, so it was that trajectory. Once Malcolm Little was resurrected as Malcolm X, and then Malcolm X evolved toward being Al Hajj Malik al Shabazz. What he did was he realigned, or he aligned himself with that uh, strategic trajectory. That's why he was always saying, no, not civil rights, human rights. But he didn't start it. He picked up the banner because by that time, the people who started it had been either neutralized or had died, and they were trying. So as they're falling to the ground in death, they reach out. Malik Shabazz reaches out his hand. He grabs the baton, and he starts running his leg in that race. Now, simultaneous to that, in 1963, I believe it was, our ancestor, Sheikh Dawood Faisal, Rahmatullah alayhi, he was at the United Nations. He presented, but the way he did it was he did a letter, open letter to the delegates of the UN, not on behalf of black people as a people, but on behalf of Muslims, right? Calling the Muslims at the UN, calling them to the ideals of Islam. Speak up, according to Islam. This is a well-known document. So there's a photograph. I have a book right now in my vast library. It's called Malcolm X, The Great Photos. You ever look at something, and you say, well, this is great, but the people who did this lack information. So there's a photograph of Sheikh Dawood and Minister Malcolm X taken at the UN. They're standing there talking, right? Malcolm X got on his suit and tie. You know what I mean? The minister, with that look, iconic look. Sheikh Dawood is standing there, got on the long jalabia, beard, kufi, and they standing there talking. And I looked at the caption in the book, and it said, Malcolm X speaks to somebody. I said to myself, the people who put this book together, they don't know who Sheikh Dawood was. They only knew Malcolm. They didn't know Sheikh Dawood. So, many of the Muslims, and I'm not saying this in a derogatory way, I'm being analytical. Many of the Muslim leaders amongst black folks in America right now, they still following a civil rights paradigm. They're Muslim, but they still following early Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Not even late Dr. Martin Luther King. The Martin Luther King Jr. who took human rights positions that got him killed. They're not even following that. Many of the Muslims, they've taken a civil rights position as opposed to a human rights position. But two significant things have happened since the martyrdom of Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, rahmatullah alayhi, in 1965. Two significant things have happened. Number one, the world has been slowly turning in the direction of human rights. The direction of human. all over the world now. People are lifting up the banner of human rights. No, this is how we, you know. So, and that's a change from back in the 60s when Minister Malcolm was here. Another major change is that now countries do intervene in the affairs of other countries. You know, if you committing genocide, Bosnia, Darfur, Ukraine, so now countries will get together and they will find a way to inject themselves. And so there is the vision of the We Charge Genocide leaders, none of whom were Muslim, that was then baton passed on to Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, Rahmatullah alayhi. That vision and that strategic vision, the time for that has just arrived now. And that's why our brother, I'm going to lift up. There's a lot of leaders I lift up. People always ask me, well, why you mention this and that? Because my teacher taught me you always have to give credit where credit is due, man.
Right.
Don't be a leader speaking, running your mouth, plagiarizing somebody else's idea. No, man, that's dishonest, you know? So uh, people are quoting me. They always hear the isnad that I come from. In fact, we're taught that in Islam. No, man, don't be plagiarizing what the Prophet said. No, he said it. You know what I mean? And there's a whole isnad. Okay, so what is our isnad in America? Where did these teachings? If you believe that Allah blessed the same God that liberated the children of Israel can liberate us. If you believe that, same God that raised up the Jahiliyyah Arabs can raise up. So if you believe that, then who are the narrators in our Isnad in America? So when you listen to me, I'm always quoting Mu'alimi Sheikh Alam Tawfiq Rahmatullah alayhi. But I might be quoting Imam Warfati Muhammad. I may be quoting this one. I'm quoting that one. So now I'm going to lift up our brother, Sheikh Muhammad Sharif, that lives in Mali now. May Allah preserve him. Who I think I've known him about 20 years or something like that. And so the first time I heard any Muslim leader mention what I just said about the Monroe Doctrine, it was Sheikh Muhammad Sharif. He said it. He said, quote, we need a Monroe Doctrine in America. We need to stop following fatwa from Saudi and fatwa from here and there and all these other countries. And I might add to that, all these other countries where they don't have human rights. But that's a whole nother, they so that's one. So two, there are people right now, African Americans, Americans of African descent, some of whom are Muslim, who are involved in the modern day 21st century struggle for recognition of the human rights of Americans of African descent. See, right now, the attorney, Musa Danfodio, he's one of them. I mean, these are people, and they didn't just get there. They're at the UN in legal forums, doing the work. Talk is cheap, man. And unfortunately now, with the advance of social media, you know what I mean? Uh, People do a lot of talking, man. That's one of the problems in the Muslim community. Everybody got an opinion. Because you got an opinion, don't make you an expert. You're not an expert on anything except your own opinion to yourself, you know. But we got everybody got an opinion. Everybody got this and no, man. And we do too much talking and too little work. But nothing was of substantial value was ever built by talk. It was built by work. The Prophet alayhi salam was Sadat received the Wahy Allah, and he turned around, and then the Muslims went to work implementing that. So that's my long-winded way of answering your question, Imam, as we wrap up.
I would love to continue this conversation. As you know, me and you say we're going to talk a half an hour and turn into 2 hours. You
We
know,
apologize. We apologize to
no,
the.
no, but that's us. It's fine. But I got to go do some work.
Yeah, I'm with you.
and, and unfortunately, I got to go do some work because enough of us don't do enough work.
That's right.
I remember your saying at one of the summits, I don't know which one it was,
Hmm.
uh, but you said something that I would never forget. And I
I know
mentioned
what
that
I know
yesterday.
what you're getting ready to say.
It
Go
was
ahead.
my favorite line from you. This like, don't come to the Imam with some bright idea that he could do.
Right. Sitting there, you're sitting around meditating and ruminating on work for us.
Right? So that line, uh, and I put that line with a classic from Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu.
Right.
Imam Ali, they came to him and they said to him, you know, in the time of Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu and Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu and Uthman, we ain't have all these fitan, as you mentioned, the Kitabul Fitan, these books of sedition. Well, they lived in the time of Ali, the Zaman of fitan, right? That time of fitan. And they said to him, they was complaining, the people, you. He looked at him with his piercing gaze. He said, Abu Bakr, Umar, and Ali had men like me. I got men like you.
Yeah.
That
Ooh, Lord have mercy.
was Sayyidina Ali. So I was feeling that because sometimes you said it, and in most of the Imams, especially in the Muslim American of African descent community, most of those Imams got there through work. They didn't get there through scholarship. They didn't get there through money. They got there because they was the only ones working. And they were elevated to Imam because the work needed to be done. And unfortunately, they were among the few who was willing to do the work. Like, and I tell my community all the time, and I'm quite sure you probably say the same thing. I said, don't let nobody step up after I'm dead talking about what they want to do. Now's the time to do all that shake stuff you talking while I'm alive. Not when I'm dead and all of a sudden, you know, I'll do it. No. I didn't become the Imam. You didn't become the Imam except after you already put in the work. You was already on the ground. That's why they picked you. You was there. We need more of us actually on the ground, even if we never assume leadership, because our groundwork is a part of leadership. There is no leadership without work.
And we need to be and we need to practice sabran with one another. We need to practice sabran. We need to lower our egos. Practice. You know, people love to talk about imams and positions of leadership who have egos, but you have brothers and sisters in the ranks who have big egos, and we need to all lower our egos. We need to practice sabran with one another. We need to pray for our leaders. We need to, as Rasulullah alayhi salam said and embodied, we need to practice love and compassion for one another. You know, Allah tells us in the Quran, the believers are loving and compassionate with one another and hard on the unbelievers. Then you look at the Muslim ranks and we see the Muslims being loving and compassionate with unbelievers, polite, deferential with unbelievers, and then get in the presence of the believers and be talking all harsh, returning salams with bass in their voice, and all of that kind of stuff. That believe me, you couldn't have gotten away with that, man. During my generation, like when we were young, because I mean, because number one, we were all training,
Right.
you know, so you got all that bass in your voice, you can step on the mat, man. And, I'm serious. Now look around. We got all of these imams, all of these sheikhs. Ain't nobody on the mat. They just sit. Don't get me started, man. But I'm just saying, yeah,
Hey,
we got
Imam. But guess
love,
what? We need
compassion,
that spirit.
patience.
The summit, and that's for us to realize what we have to do.
Yes.
The real work is when it's over.
Over. Yes.
Okay, we had our speeches, we had now what you're going to do,
Right.
right? And what we try to do, us as people who are responsible for helping us become a people,
Yes.
we try to show that example through our work, not just our talk.
Absolutely. And we are imperfect in doing so. So those of you who are upset with Imam Amin, he don't think of this, he don't that. Oh, that Imam Talib, he ain't blah, 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 blah. Yeah, okay, so pray for us. As Sheikh Tawfiq used to say, pray for us as opposed to assassinating our character.
And make dua. We're having, I told you, we're having our Me Too moment. And someone asked me, are you going to, I said, I don't want to talk about that. Right? What I say, as leaders, as influencers, do your best to watch your behavior. None of us are perfect.
Absolutely.
Right? But at the same time, be careful how we assassinate our leaders.
Absolutely.
Even if they're fallible, because we're all fallible. And see the other side of the coin. We ain't excusing bad behavior, right? As a people, especially us and our sojourn here in this crazy America, we know we got stuff, all of us. We've been through some stuff, going through some stuff, and going to see some more stuff. But at the same time, remember, despite that stuff, we still have to build. So don't be so quick to destroy us.
May Allah have mercy on us, forgive our sins. May Allah guide us, inspire us, fortify us, protect us, and protect our progeny. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.
Barakallahu, ma'am. We'll see y'all tonight at 6 o'clock for the Black Imams Roundtable. Barakallahu bikum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.